summer of easing lockdowns is slowly being undone. Spain has the most COVID-19 cases in Europe. Officials in its wealthy Catalan region have announced restaurants and bars will be shut for the next 15 days, but will be allowed to offer takeaway.
The situation is worrying, so these steps are necessary if we don't want the outbreak to spread even faster. If we don't want the health system to collapse, we have to act now. We are asking everyone to reduce their mobility, limit social gatherings, and work from home.
But the reaction in the Catalan capital, Barcelona, has been less than enthusiastic.
It's been 3 months and we still haven't gotten money from our furlough scheme. Now they're going to shut the restaurant down for 15 more days. I don't think they will pay us wait staff.
Similar restrictions are in place in the Czech Republic for the next 3 weeks. The country has Europe's highest rate of new coronavirus infections, with 433 cases per 100,000 people. Partial lockdown is also in effect in the Netherlands, which has recorded almost 44,000 new cases in a week, an increase of 60%. Among newly announced measures, wearing masks indoors for those aged over 13. In the UK, new cases have quadrupled in the past 3 weeks, with more patients hospitalized now than before its strict lockdown in March. Instead of a lockdown, the government has implemented a 3-level alert system. Most British cities are on medium alert, which means restaurants and pubs have to shut at 10 p.m. The Prime Minister has ignored advice from a scientific advisory group on COVID-19, recommending to implement a circuit breaker lockdown.
But having read and considered the sage advice, I have genuinely concluded that a circuit break is in the national interest. Genuinely concluded. Mr. Speaker, it's the failure of the Prime Minister's strategy that means tougher measures are now unavoidable. That's Sage's view.
I rule out nothing, of course, in combating the virus. But we are going to do it with the local, the regional approach that can drive down and will drive down the virus if it is properly implemented.
According to the World Health Organization, a record 700,000 new infections were recorded in Europe last week, a 36% increase from the week prior. Hospital admission rates are rising fast again across the bloc, raising fears it could reach a point where non-COVID patients are turned away as the sector struggles to cope. Natasha Hussain, TRT World.
Bruno Verstraete is a partner and chief economist at asset management firm Lakefield Partners. He joins me now from Zurich. Good to have you on the program with us. How much of a balance is this for governments to implement these restrictions that are meant to slow or contain the coronavirus, but at the same time not grinding the economy to a halt?
Well, that's a very delicate balance, I think. We went from fear to fatigue. I think a lot of healthy people that are locked up, and I think that's the lesson we learned in the first lockdown, is that you should not lock up any healthy consumer. That imposes basically that you need to trace and test a lot. And I think that's where the difference is now versus the first wave that we've seen. Of course, you need still the discipline of everyone in participating in the society to make sure that they are still doing whatever they are supposed to do instead of spreading it around. And I think that is at the same time the weakness. The testing is going fine. I think the tracing is really the weakness. And there needs to be much more discipline and almost an obligation to do that, because that's the only way that they will be able to contain and have the delicate balance between containing the virus and at the same time making sure that the wounds that are still being caused every day by the virus economically are not going to change into scars over the long run.
Yeah, you talk about the fatigue that a lot of people in these countries are feeling well over 6 months into many of these restrictions. How much more can European economies handle at this point? And which sectors are the hardest hit? Because, of course, some people do have the luxury of being able to stay at home and work from home, but other people don't, such as people in the service economy.
Well, I think the obvious sectors that we've seen affected are clearly the service industry. What needs to be noticed there is that in Europe, about 70% of the economy is running on services. So manufacturing being much less impacted, even though one needs to go to work, there's no home office facility in that one. The service industry being tourism, travel, restaurants, entertainment, sports, all not to be underestimated, are clearly the ones taking the first wave of impact. What we see now is that is gradually moving into the manufacturing. Just one practical example, if there's no more planes manufactured, the makers of the plane engines are going to get into trouble. And that is a very sensitive thing, because that's exactly where the employment is in Europe. And that is where the bounce back can be seen, or has to be seen. So the governments need to do everything to bridge the gap to the new normal, or to the re-normal, if we can call it like that.
Right. The IMF says that swift action by central banks has actually softened the economic impact caused by the lockdowns, and warned against the early removal of some of these measures. What kind of measures could we see to further help economies kickstart economies once the pandemic winds down?
Well, I think the first economic measure, which is a new one, is to contain the virus. I think that's something that everyone is aware of. The measures afterwards really need to be focused on employment. And I think there, the role of the governments need to be looked at into the new economy, and the result of the pandemic into the K recovery. You will have sectors that will suffer, but the sectors that are doing really well are the ones to be promoted, because some of that is there to stay. Home office, one example, distance learning, e-commerce. I think those are sectors that are new and that have advanced much faster than they were already having on a growth path. I think now they really went there much faster, and that needs to be promoted. It's clearly about employment. Employment will restore the consumer confidence, will restore the consumption, and will make sure that the speeding of the recovery is much faster.
All right, we'll leave it there. Bruno Verstraete in Zurich. Thank you so much.